Okay, wow. We've got some housekeeping to do before I jump into this episode. Obviously, the past couple of weeks I've been putting out new episodes, but before that, it's been basically since August. And it wasn't intentional. I didn't fully plan on it, but what happened was we did a bit of traveling for a couple of weeks, and then pretty much right when we got back, we moved. And I'll be completely honest, I just did not have the bandwidth to go to work, do the whole like traveling, coming home thing, and move all at the same time. So unfortunately, the podcast and my social media kind of took a dip a little bit, but we're back. I'm not doing anything crazy anytime soon. So we are back here, and it feels a bit odd because I haven't sat down to film. I think it's been since end of July, sometime in the summer. So it feels good. And if you kind of stuck around through my little unplanned hiatus, thank you so much. I still have so much more to say and so much more I want to share. And if you're somebody who watches on YouTube, I do have to apologize for the extremely bare background. I didn't necessarily have a snazzy background before, but there was at least like a couple pictures on the wall, and I think I had some lights. But unfortunately, this place is a bit empty because we've been living in studios or 1-bedrooms, two at this 3-bedroom place, but we just don't have stuff to fill it up. So I do apologize for the bare background. I'm sure it will fill in eventually. So I do think that is pretty much the end of housekeeping. And I do have some fun episodes planned in the future, so make sure you stick around. And today I've had the idea for this episode and to talk about this topic for at least a year, if not longer. And I think sometimes it just takes a little bit to get your ideas to be fully developed. I'm hoping that some in my audience know exactly what I'm talking about when I say this, but as somebody who grew up with undiagnosed scrupulosity OCD, one of my obsessions or fixations, and where a lot of my compulsive behaviors stemmed from, was Christlike attributes. And I will explain, because obviously my background is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or Mormons, if you haven't heard of that. So I will explain if you have never been Mormon or you are unfamiliar with what that exactly means. We have this book called Preach My Gospel, and it's used for missionaries primarily. I know that other members of the church also use it, but I didn't see it used a ton, unless it was me using it. And it basically just covers all the basics of the doctrine that our religion believes in. And it also has a section, I think it's chapter 7. I'm like 99% sure that it's chapter 7 that talks about Christ-like attributes, which there's basically a list of characteristics that we believe Jesus Christ had when he was on the earth. And we are encouraged as members of the church, but especially as missionaries, to regularly work towards developing those attributes in our life. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not here to say it's a bad thing, but I kind of made it a bad thing in the sense that I was I'm trying to search for the right word here, but it was obviously fear-based, but I had a system for how I approached developing the attributes in my life, and it just ramped up as I got older. And so I would study to death. If we hadn't just moved, I would pull out my book for you and show you, but I don't know where it is right now. And I would just re-study the same scriptures and the same content in this book and kind of obsessively journal about what that attribute meant, in my opinion, and how I could apply it in my life. And I set goals. I remember on my mission, I set goals every week about a different attribute. It was just a big focus of mine. However, going away kind of from that introduction, so everybody knows what we're talking about, I always, like since I was a teenager, I really had this fixation on humility. And again, for those who aren't familiar with what I'm speaking about, the other ones, it's things like diligence, obedience, humility, charity. Those are the kinds of things that I'm speaking about. But humility was really important for me. And I'm not sure if I had an experience when I was really young that made me so afraid of this, but I remember sitting in Sunday school and I would raise my hand and ask questions, and I was really trying to figure out what humility meant, because I was very scared of the consequences of the opposite of humility, which obviously is pride. And in my mind, those consequences were things like, oh, you're gonna lose your faith and leave the church, or you're gonna be selfish and not have God's guidance in your life. And if you don't have the humility to listen to God, you're gonna go down the wrong path and your life isn't gonna be as good as it could be. And I was constantly trying to be the best I could so I could receive help from God. And so I was really worried about it. And I would get so concerned whenever I felt proud of myself for an accomplishment that I had done, or anything along that line, like basically any kind of self-esteem at all. I would get very nervous. And I had a lot of church leaders try to explain to me what it was, but I also heard people say over the pulpit that being proud of yourself was not humility, because everything's actually God's doing. And it just became something that was very confusing for me. And it eventually got so big that it really became a trigger for me. And I was convinced that in any type of conflict or disagreement that I was facing, I had to take all of the blame for that situation. And I was so good. I was so good at this. It was so ironic. But I was really good at rationalizing why things were my fault. Because if somebody was upset at me, I totally saw where they were coming from. You know, you're so right. And no matter how they had treated me at any point or whatever, why I did what I had done, I never faulted them, because if I had not done that thing, then this agreement would not have happened. And I could give a million stories of how this worked out, but obviously it really impacted my self-esteem, because if anyone didn't like me, which is inevitable as a human, I didn't get that at the time, but if anyone didn't like me, that was the apocalypse. And it was my fault, and I had done something wrong. And especially, you get what I'm trying to say. It was a mess. And so I have a feeling that I'm not the only one that struggled with this, especially within the religious OCD, scrupulosity community. And so in this episode, I wanted to share a list of what I have come to believe as I've recovered from OCD and attempted to move towards my values in my day-to-day living, what humility is and also what it is not. But for the humility is list, humility is allowing God into your life, which obviously that kind of leans more towards the idea that if you're prideful, you may not recognize him speaking to you or be willing to listen to the commandments, whatever. That's the kind of vein that is explaining, allowing God into your life. 2 is nurturing your faith. So if you are humble, you recognize that you need or want God to be in your life, and you'll take the steps to have that relationship with him, rather than being prideful in the sense like, I can do it on my own. 3, accepting responsibility for the mistakes you do make without compromising on setting boundaries for yourself. And I added without compromising on setting boundaries for yourself because it's not when you take it too far and you accept responsibility and that's it. It's also having the self-respect to recognize that it's not all your fault and that doesn't mean you're prideful. And the last thing I have on the humility is number 4 is allowing yourself to be proud of your accomplishments. this is kind of a funny humility is list because it's like humility is / reminders for people with religious OCD, because it's not a sin, in my opinion, and it's not being prideful, in my opinion, to accomplish something and not necessarily say, I could not have done this without God. Like, you can have a sense of pride in who you are and what you've been through, while also acknowledging that you believe you had help from God, right? And I also want to give a disclaimer before I move on to the humility is not list. The things I put at the beginning, like humility is allowing God into your life and nurturing your faith, that is specifically in the context of people who value their faith in being religious. I'm not saying, by saying that people who are not religious are therefore not humble. That's not what I'm saying. I just want to make that clear, because I don't believe that at all. I believe people just follow their values and beliefs. It doesn't say anything about them. But for people who care, these are the disclaimers. Okay, moving on to the humility is not list. And this one I kind of mentioned already, but it says, attributing every single one of your accomplishments to God, saying, I didn't do any of this, etc. I don't have anything to add to that. Also, the second one, I shouldn't have shared my thoughts because I already said this. Taking the full blame in relationship conflicts out of the fear of being prideful. Covered that. Now, these next two. The first one is praying for direction on every single decision you make. I used to think that was humility. I had a grandmother. I never met her because she passed before I was born, but I've heard stories. And I have a sneaking suspicion that this is kind of where I inherited my scrupulosity OCD from, because it is a little bit genetic. But she would pray about what to wear, what to eat for breakfast, and everything had a spiritual implication. In my opinion, if it's that intense and you're doing it because you think you're being humble, I don't think that's humility. I think that you're crossing into the territory of potentially, not in every situation, scrupulosity OCD territory. Like, we all know maybe God doesn't necessarily have something to say about every decision in your life, and that's okay. It doesn't mean you're not being humble if you make decisions of your own discretion. Okay, last one. Beating yourself up because you want to be humble about all of your mistakes. And I think this is something that pretty much every scrupulosity OCD sufferer has in common. We all don't have the best self-esteem. We all tend to beat up on ourselves because of our mistakes. And I think that when you're doing that in the name of humility, you feel like it's a righteous thing to do, but it's not at all. At all. And so, I mean, now there is a lot of religious discourse, at least within the church I grew up in, about having healthy self-esteem and healthily handling mistakes. But I think that we get that twisted a lot. So here's your reminder that that's not humility. I wanted to make this episode because sometimes those of us with religious OCD are so caught up in being good enough that the lines between living your faith and getting into OCD territory are so muddied. I just wanted to kind of brick by brick and piece by piece put out these reminders. And in this case, it's that adopting humility into your life, if that's something that you value as an attribute that you want to exhibit, that doesn't mean sacrificing your self-esteem or your sense of accomplishment, because you can handle things. You can, but it's a blessing that God is there to help you. That's the healthiest way that I have seen to look at it, and that's what I value believing. But I would love to hear your thoughts as well, especially if you also have struggled with humility in the past. I know this might be a little bit more niche, but it's funny how everyone with scrupulosity OCD has something specific that they got stumbled upon. And that was one of my big ones. So I would love to talk more about it. But thank you so much for tuning in, and I will talk to you guys next week.